gamma system. And I believe it's getting, what, about 8 or 9 years, I think it is, since our last major update with that. So, and you all know what it's like with computers and software. You're never done upgrading and keeping up with it. So it's something that we can't just ignore and have to keep looking at doing properly. And of course, with these new technologies that are out there, you need skilled and qualified people to look after it and to make sure it's operating at its top efficiency. And there is some potential for revenue generation, and that's other things that we're looking at right now. You know, data is very valuable, and you know, there's other organizations out there that may be interested in purchasing that data. So them are some things that we want to be looking at. And then talent readiness. And that's a big issue, I think, with a lot of organizations right across Canada right now, is, you know, our talent pool is aging, and we're looking at a lot of retirements coming up. When we look in our next 5 years, it gets a little scary of how many people are going to be retiring. And we have to be able to, we have to have a succession plan that looks after that. And so that we have people that can move into these positions smoothly without major downfalls to the whole operations. And like I mentioned, lots of retirements coming up. In order to get people in the place for these executive positions to take over, there needs to be mentoring and job shadowing. And that can't be just working off the side of your desk and doing 2 or 3 other jobs, which many of our staff are doing. You know, they have to be dedicated to this new position that they're going to be taking over. They have to be dedicated to that for a certain length of time so that they can smoothly move into that operation without any hesitation. And that's going to take, in some cases, several years to learn that. So we have to have them people available to do that. And of course, as you're moving those people into higher positions, you need to be training new people coming in the door, you know, to fill the positions that they just left. So this all takes more people, and it has to be something that we're looking forward over the next years. And the third thing is maintaining a competitive compensation packages. And of course, we have to be able to offer a package, salary, benefits, and training, work-life balance that can continue to attract high-quality
saying that we can't for sure, because it depends on how we manage finances through the year. But these are the kinds of things that we're looking at. And we don't like to have to do it, but we do, because we're very good financial managers at SAMA. We've learned through the years to be very good financial managers. All in all, we do support Saskatchewan's growth. As Myron had mentioned earlier, we've contributed over $195 million on cumulative tax gains from property assessment in Saskatchewan over the years. That's a contribution to Saskatchewan's growth. That's a contribution to your local municipality growth. We're proud of that, and we're proud of the work that we do. We want to continue with that momentum, absolutely. SAMA's annual budget is around $24 million right now. So when you look at that in perspective with the annual, the tax gains following the re-inspections that we do, it's hard to compare, and to think that our small budget, relatively speaking, small budget, is contributing that much. We want to continue to contribute that much. We're finding it more and more difficult to be able to do that. And I wanted to be totally honest today. I'm at the age in my life where it's like total honesty is the only way to be for me. So that's what you're getting from me today. I'm happy to answer any questions that come up as a result of this presentation. I want to tell you that the financial picture is worrisome for us and me as CEO, but on the other hand, the products and services side is stellar. So the message I want to leave with you is we're in good shape. We've got great employees. We've got great support. We're doing the job for you that we need to be doing. We want to keep that going. We really, really do. And you, as our partners, want us to keep it going, honestly. I'm wanting to put that right out there. A little bit on chargeable maintenance reviews. As an example, we charge $25 per maintenance review, which means about 60% of our maintenance reviews need to have a site visit. So we charge $25. Municipalities potentially could be charging that through. I don't know if it happens to be a permitting process or whatever. Our cost to do that field site visit is at a minimum $100. So when we look at the cost comparison there, we are receiving $25 and we're paying out at a minimum $100. When I look at my own expenses as on a personal level, that doesn't make good accounting for me. So I want you to understand some of the financial stuff that we're looking at. We do important work. As the minister and Myron has mentioned, property tax provides the highest source of local revenue for most municipalities. It's therefore of utmost importance. The education property tax collected is paid to the provincial government general revenue fund. That it supports education in the province. SAMA is the predominant supplier of assessed values in the province, and we're not the only. Of course, we've got wonderful people who work at the City of Prince Albert, the City of Saskatoon, City of Swift Current, City of Regina. They do their own property assessments. We have responsibility for oversight on those particular assessments as well, and the governance. So between us and the cities, we're upholding the assessed values in the province, and we're very proud to do so. Fairness and equity in the property assessment system is very important, and you'll hear us speak of that over and over. Just switching gears for a minute, one of the things we like to do, and I saw so many hands go up on that we have lots of elected officials. There's probably some people who are new and haven't necessarily worked through a revaluation before. We do have lots of information on our SAMA website. So, and there's lots of that information provided to the right here in the trade show area, if you want to call it that. So please access it. Please give us a call, send an email if you have any questions. We're happy to come out, meet with your council if that would be indicated. The regional office in your area is happy to provide you with any information that you need. This is just an example of some of the publications that are provided. And this year we created a new site, a new spot on our website for new councillors. So what is assessment? Why does it matter? What are some of the basic things you need to know? It's a site for new councillors on our SAMA website. If you wanted to access that, I'd highly recommend it. So just in summary, thank you so much for coming today and for hearing our story and for supporting SAMA. We want to do the very, very best job that we can for you. As part of our submission to Excellence Canada and as a recruitment effort, we have created a video. It was something that we wanted to do. It's something we've needed for years and years. And in order to attract people to SAMA and tell them what we do as an organization, talk about our work-life balance and whatnot, we put together a video. And so we're going to play it for you today. And then when that video is done, I will invite Kevin Grote up, please, to do his presentation. So thank you very much and enjoy the video.
What do I enjoy about working at SAMA? That's a good question.
What makes SAMA a great place to work? It's the people.
I enjoy my work at SAMA because no day is the same.
Where SAMA really values its employees and their well-being.
We're an independent agency with over 150 employees. Our team develops assessment policy and standards. We conduct property evaluation services, and we confirm municipal assessment roles.
I've chosen to work at SAMA for over 35 years because I find great meaning in the work that we do. It's giving back to the people of Saskatchewan. No 2 days are alike, and I go home every day thankful for the work that I'm doing.
We work hard to create real work-life balance for our employees.
SAMA offers me flexibility by allowing me to work from home 3 days a week, which gives me the opportunity to coach my daughter's softball team. SAMA understands the importance of what you do in your personal life benefits your work life, which makes me incredibly thankful.
We're parents, we're grandparents, we're neighbors, we're friends, and all of which we appreciate can bring with it certain challenges and demands at times. We encourage our staff to take the time to find that balance that they need so that they can be happy and healthy in our workplace.
SAMA helps staff with their career developments in a few different ways. They support you in taking courses outside of SAMA, where you can work on different projects that aren't necessarily in your own area of expertise that can help you further your career here.
I know that as I work for SAMA, I have the goals, the tasks I must meet as an individual hired to do my job. But I also know behind the scenes that SAMA totally supports me with my family. What I can say is that it really fulfills my life.
Our focus remains on continual improvement and striving for excellence. We want SAMA to remain a place where people can have long, meaningful, enjoyable careers.
Thanks, Betty. Well, as the slide says, I'm Kevin Grote. I'm the Managing Director of Assessment Services. I'm new to this position. Obviously, from the lack of hair and what's there is gray, I'm not that new. But if you're a longtime attendee to our annual meetings, you would have been used to seeing Todd Tressline up here. Now, he's actually in the crowd here today. He's back as a past board member, but he's enjoying his retirement. And here with me today is, at the back table, we've got Frances Simonson. She's our Regina Region Manager. And as well, Rebecca Schultz. She's the new Director of Assessment Services. As well, Randy Rainbow is our new Saskatoon Regional Manager. And Grant Grandfield is the new Industrial Manager. And you'll notice a theme here. You get a couple retirements and then a whole bunch of shifting goes along with that. So with that, I'd like to provide an overview of the assessment services we provide our clients. First off, legislation only gives us the authority to do the valuation part of the assessment for municipalities, other than in one instance in rural municipalities, and that relates if you've got a business operating as well as using something for farm use. Now, so we've got the annual maintenance, that's the top left box there, that's probably the most common thing you see us out doing. And what that is as you know, you have changes going on in your municipality, you let us know about them, we come out and look at them. In addition, we'll notice things about properties that we want to update, and so we'll do those on an annual basis. And when we're doing our annual maintenance, we always want to know when you want your values by, so we can provide them to you in a timely fashion. Now, secondly is supportive value. So if you have appeals in your municipality, again, we handle all that supportive value work for the valuation. Classification and exemption appeals have to be handled by the municipal assessor. And then here we are this year, revaluation year. And that work, you know, you might think it's a once every 4-year thing. You know, it's kind of like some people say, well, a preacher gets up and it's a nice job because they only have to work 1 day a week. Well, no, there's stuff going along every year of the reval cycle as we prepare for it. And finally, the re-inspections. And that's where we take and we review all the properties in a municipality, or simply one select group of properties, just to update the physical information on them. And we service this out of, as Betty identified, the 8 regions that we operate, plus our central office houses our industrial unit. So, annual maintenance for this year. Overall, we're almost 95% complete the 35,000 planned inspections. And as of April 3rd, we delivered 680 of our clients' information. Then on the industrial side, and we've automated a lot of things in there that we could. For example, at one point in time, a long time ago when I started, a lot of this information would have been gathered manually. Now each year, through the process we call standardization, we take information from the ministry on the wells, and we use that to form the foundation of the assessments. And so over 85,000 properties are valued each year using that method. In addition, we act in place of the municipal assessor, and oil and gas companies provide us information directly to give additional updates. Then we have the pipeline assessments, and then all the mining. And I think the mining, there's only one uranium mine that we're still waiting for some information on. So the 2025 delivery of values. So a number of years ago, you know, I guess unsaid expectations leads to a lot of disappointment. For a long time, we never asked our clients, when do you need this information by? We would just take and say, well, give us, you know, by October 1st, give us all your maintenance, and then we would just start working on it in whatever fashion we deem fit. And people are wondering, well, we gave you the request 6 months ago, where is it? Now we've moved to a case of asking, when do you need the information by? And then aim to deliver it by then. Now, our internal goal is that we want 85% delivered by the date requested and 95% within 3 weeks of that date if we can't make it. Right now, we've met 86% delivery dates, and 97% of our clients receive the package within 3 weeks of their requested date. And unfortunately, we do have some that are delivered beyond that point in time. And that's what we look to each year, trying to reduce that amount. This revaluation year, the big thing there is, of course, the roll has to be open for 60 days. So that's time, of course, when people can launch their appeal. So it does give more time for people to review their assessments, which is good, but also puts strains on the boards of revision, because then they end up with less time to do their activities in. So as of April 4th, we're just under 50% of the rolls open in the province, open or closed, of our clients. And looking back to 2021, it was just slightly over 50%. So, you know, we're running pretty close to the same level. Moving on to supportive value work. Anyone pick out the revaluation years of the slide? There's a little key giveaway there. Yeah. 2017 was our high watermark in appeals. There's over 7,000 appeals, and then years 2, 3, and 4, following the introduction of the revaluation, you usually see a decline. Of note is these last years, 2022 to 2024, those levels are approaching levels we haven't seen in a decade. Like the volume has been dropping, which is good, but it doesn't correspond to a total drop off in the time spent, because what we're seeing is repeat appeals, a lot by tax agents, that they're complex. So the appeals that are remaining do take longer to process. If you were here yesterday for Chad Boyko from the SMB's presentation, he showed the similar slide, and SMB, the next level of appeals, kind of follow the same trends. Year 1 and 2 of the reval cycle see the highest volumes there. And prior to 2013, SMB appeals were really a big part of our day-to-day operations. We'd have about 25 a year. And for example, so far out of 2024, we've got, I think, just slightly over 80 appeals to the SMB. So again, that's each level that goes up, the more resources are taken to handle the appeals. Finally, revaluations. And like I said, it's not a one out of 4 year activity. Each year we're verifying sales, around 15 to 20,000 sales to actually verify. And the sales are the foundation of the market value system, so it's important we get that right. What this slide is showing, that our average number of sales per year for each of the Bay States has been declining. And so what does, I think our highest, we peaked at about 54,000 sales a year. We're down to around 44,000 sales coming up for the revaluation in 2029. What does that mean? Well, if we build the models off the sales and we have less sales to work off of, then it gets harder to build the models because we have less information to make decisions on. And finally, our reinspection activities. So in 2025, just over 68,500 properties, I guess, and just over 16 RMs received new values, and then the rest is spread out over residential, commercial, and industrial. Looking ahead for 2026, coincidentally, it's about the same amount of properties. I had to double check that when we rolled up our plans. Again, 40% of those properties will be found in RMs, and then 31% residential property reviews, and then the balance in industrial and commercial. And this brightly colored map is if it's got a color on it, and excluding the logo of the slide there, it's been reviewed since 2018. And in 2018 was when we set out the goal of doing re-inspections once every 12 years in a community. And right now in rural municipalities, we're probably looking at closer to a 15-year cycle as best we can estimate right now. It's not 12 years, I can recognize that. That level of math I'm comfortable with. But it's significantly better than the 45 years we were at prior to 2018. Now, one item that slowed down our pace slightly is we're collecting more information to get our agricultural land assessments in a format ready for fully utilizing GIS. And it's like, we know if we take this opportunity right now to slow down and collect this information, and it takes a little while to lay this foundation down, the next time through, there's going to be efficiencies that we'll never realize without having the information in a format that we can utilize GIS for. So I intentionally presented kind of our four main activities, and if you think of it, you look at the triangle here and within it, the boundaries of the triangle are our resources, and those are constrained. When we talk about that property inspection goal, there's only two parts of that goal that contribute directly to that goal of 100,000 or 110,000 property reviews a year. And if any of the, like the appeals or the reval work, if they grow, something's got to give, because we're sticking in those boundaries. And that's just the fact of life. And that's where, when you take a look at our overall reviews since, we've got 2012 on the slide here. So we set that goal back in 2012 because we recognized that what it was that provided value for you, our clients, was doing the property reviews. So in 2012 and 2013, we were averaging less than 50,000 total property reviews in a year. And if you remember, 35,000, the majority of that would have been maintenance reviews. Then through technology and process changes, you can see 2014 to 17, we were making some more process changes. Then by 2018, we were ready to focus on our goal of 100,000 property reviews a year, and we met that. 2020, the province gave us some additional funding. We were able to hire a few more staff and started on a goal of 110,000. And you can see there's some years, and like obviously 2023, we recognize in preparation for a revaluation, we would not be able to do 110,000 property reviews. So 2024, we had the goal of 110,000, and we came in at just over 106,000, which in my mind is very successful still, all things considered. And when we look at since 2018, we had if you sum up each year, goal was 740,000 in total, and we came in at 741,000. So, we've got 1,000 properties over. Where are we aiming at in 2025? And some might think this is a picture of a Saskatchewan springtime, and it feels like it right now, but we're aiming at 100,000, and that's simply to allow planned time for supportive value work. It's a reval year. We know we're going to have more appeals, so we need to plan for that time. If we get less, that's a bonus. We can add inspections in. It's easier adding in than trying to take away. Now, I don't know how many people recognize this picture. Where's Kelly? Kelly would recognize this one. Maybe this perspective might help it, right? The perspective is very important here. But if you think that a faulty foundations in buildings is a thing relegated to the past, it's amazing actually the number of articles I see and that come across it. For example, this one is the Leaning Tower of South Padre, or Faulty Towers as it was nicknamed by the locals. And that's as far as it got in construction. And by that stage, one part of the foundation had settled 16 inches, the other part hadn't. And they had to, they imploded it. And, unfortunately with foundation issues, a lot of times those don't become readily apparent right at the start. Like, if they were on day one there and they're saying, oh, look at that, 16 inches lower, let's stop. They're up 31 floors, and all of a sudden it's becoming, oh, I think we have a problem here. And you might wonder, why am I bringing up foundations? Well, property assessment is the foundation of the main portion of the municipal revenue, which most people recognize, and a significant portion of the education property tax. And if you look at it from one perspective, what we're doing here at the agency in our property reviews, and you look at it at the goal, 100,000, 110,000, it's kind of like, yeah, we're looking at the picture that I can imagine, you know, it'd be a poor guy like me, my wife say, did you get the picture of the Tower of Pisa? Yes, I got the picture, don't worry, I took the picture. And then get home and look and realize, took the wrong shot. It's kind of like that. Yeah, we've been making that goal, but as Betty mentioned, you know, we're starting to see cracks. And, you know, we want to continue to provide a very valuable service to everyone here. And so later on this morning, we'll be having a session here asking for input into our 2026 to 2029 plans. And I just ask that you think of it as an opportunity to help us shore up our foundations. And with that, thank you very much for your time, and I'll invite Sean Cooney, our Chief Assessment Governance Officer.
Well, good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to have a chance to talk to you today. I work in SAMA's Technical Standards and Policy Division. I'm joined by several of our staff, and others are online. And it is a real pleasure to give you an update on the area that I work in. And in particular, going to go through just some general things on the policy side, but also on the reval. It's a reval year, and we've got just a few reminders. So we're going to talk about our assessment governance role. What does that mean? Our consultation model, some assessment system basics, our revaluation role, and what does that mean? Also, because it's a reval year, a quick discussion on assessment versus taxes, which is often a matter of confusion. We're going to look at the IFTI report, and I'll explain what that is. And it's a review of the assessment system in Saskatchewan. And then we're going to talk about some current assessment issues and risks that the province is facing. So the work that we do on the policy side in SAMA is set out in legislation, and we have some very specific duties that we have to fulfill. One is consulting with stakeholders, and that's a very important part of the work we do. We're the area that does the research and the policy developments. We're always looking at how do we assess property, how can we do it more efficiently, and what technology can we bring to bear. We're responsible for determining the assessment manual, guide, the publications and rules that we follow to determine assessments. And in Kevin's analogy of the importance of a foundation, these are the piles underneath that building. They have to be set and they have to be solid. We're going to talk about assessment trends. That's a duty we have, and Andrew Workman will be presenting the 2025 reval trends later today, give you a glimpse of what's happening province-wide. We supervise the provisions of the Assessment Act, and that involves the revaluation oversight that Betty mentioned, just kind of watching the entire system as the new values are being developed and informing our board in the province. We provide information and education, new technology and methodology. So we're experimenting and we're looking at what are other provinces and states doing. What does this new technology look like? And I started in this field almost 37 years ago, and I started on a cards, assessment cards they called them. It was all manual based with an eraser and pencil. And now I walk in the office and I see the work we're doing on GIS, which we're going to be looking at later today. And it's just phenomenal what we can do with the proper technology and the resources for it. And lastly, we advise the board and the ministry on assessment policy, on issues and risks. And we have an exceptional board, and they're very attuned to what's happening and supportive, and they guide us. And then we have a very strong partnership with the Ministry of Government Relations, and we really appreciate that. I just want to take a moment and also thank the staff that work in technical standards and policy. We have a very small team, but they are dedicated, talented, and highly skilled. And I'm very fortunate to work with them. They help keep the province's policies on track, and I appreciate that very much. Very quickly, the metrics, Betty had shown this. This just underlies the importance of the assessment system and getting the policies correct and solid and supportive. So we have a lot of assessment at stake, and we want to make sure that it is protected, that it is stabilized to the extent possible, because that is the revenue for municipalities, the majority of the revenue that you have to do the work that you do, and it funds education, property tax, of course. As Betty mentioned, 761 municipalities under SAMA's work. There are 4 independent cities, and this is often forgotten, especially in a reval year. We've got Saskatoon, Regina, Prince Albert, and Swift Current, who have their own assessment departments. We get a lot of inquiries to SAMA, and individuals don't realize that we're not responsible for their assessment. So they have their own group, but we work closely with them, which is really good. So our consultation model, it's unique in Saskatchewan. There are provinces that go behind closed doors, they do the research, they publish their manuals, and that's the end of it. And they've been reaching out to Saskatchewan to say, what is it you guys are doing? Because we've heard good things. Well, what we do specifically is we connect with our stakeholders and industry groups. We have a real partnership. It doesn't matter what sector it is. When we're going to update a model, we're going to sit down with you and we're going to go through the model and we're going to share information. And then when we update, we're going to share impacts. So we're researching continually. We're looking at the industry trends. We're exchanging information, and then we model. And then we go to those valuation models, be it regulated or market, and we say to ourselves, what has changed? And we share the trends with our stakeholders. And then we consult. And that's right in legislation. It's kind of unique for Saskatchewan. And we need to sit down with our partners, with our stakeholders, and talk about the changes that we're seeing. And then we have advisory committees, and there's several members of our advisory committees. There's an urban, a rural, a city, and a commercial advisory committee, and we meet twice a year. So that's very unique to Saskatchewan. We're sitting down and we're letting our stakeholders know what's happening in assessment, and you have a first-hand update on everything that's current, which is very helpful. We seek approval for our work that we do, and we go first through our board of directors, and they're going to ask the important questions. They want to know what the impacts are and who did we talk to when we came up with our models. And then ultimately, for the regulated manual that certain properties rely on, we have ministerial approval. And we have to support the work that we do in coming up with that manual. Really quickly, one slide on the assessment system. If you look at this, you get most of what you need to know, and probably more than most people in Saskatchewan. Our system has a strong history of solid improvements, and you go back to 2009 when we moved to a market value-based system. We were the last in Canada to do so. So we brought in the 3 approaches to value, and what was really beneficial to Saskatchewan, because we were the last province, we were able to incorporate a lot of lessons learned from across Canada to make our system as strong as it is today. And that's why we have some unique legislation. All property in the province is valued. It's a Latin term, ad valorem, at the value, or according to value. So when we update, we're always looking to reflect what the current value is as of that base date. We're using mass appraisal. That means that we're looking at all the market data available to us. It's not a single property appraisal. So we have the benefit of looking at every piece of information when we make our determinations of value. And this is an important one, this second last bullet. The methodology that we use for determining market values under the market valuation standard, it is in common with what other provinces are doing across Canada. It's not unique. And often what we see in a reval year, and you may get this in your local offices, somebody will bring in their assessment and they'll say, you know what, I'm not happy with this. And then ultimately it might be the system's broken. We need to fix this system. We need to look at what other provinces are doing. Well, by and large, we're using 3 approaches and we're using the same methodologies as right across Canada. So that's an important thing to note on the market side. And then lastly, we have 2 standards. This is in legislation, and what it does is it sets out a regulated standard. These are properties that are specialized, they don't typically sell, and they're done primarily on the cost approach. So we have railway, we have pipeline, that's our linear, we have mine and oil and gas resource production equipment, heavy industrial, and ag land. To value those properties, we use a manual. and all of the methodology and the rates are contained in the manual. And that provides stability to our regulated models that you don't see across Canada, where you may be introducing the income approach or other methodologies. So that's the regulated. Everything else is valued on a market standard, where we've got market data and we can value homes, multifamily, commercial, that type of thing. We're using 3 common approaches to value that include the cost approach, sales comparison, and income approach. So really it's the market telling us what the values should be for assessment purposes. And as you work with 2025 assessments and you have people questioning that, that's the basis for the market side of things. So quickly on the reval and SAMA's role. It's right in legislation that we have to update values every 4 years. And that started in 1997 and it's been at 4 years since that time. So it is our department, Technical Standards and Policy, that's responsible for updating the manual and the policies for the province, as I mentioned. Our Assessment Services Division, as Kevin spoke to, doing the valuations for all of the client municipalities of SAMA. And as I mentioned, the independent cities handle their own assessments through their assessment departments. But what we do is we have an oversight role and we work closely with the cities through a City Assessor SAMA committee to discuss common issues, and especially for revaluations. So the reval, here we are, 2025, you're getting all new assessments in your municipalities, and really that gets back to what's in legislation, and it says, equity is the dominant and controlling factor in assessment. So that's the guiding star, that's what we're seeking. Revaluations help us because values get out of date, and anyone that's looked at the market or sales per property, you realize it's not static, it changes. So a reval just basically says, let's go forward 4 years, let's update all these values, and let's realign them to improve equity. So we're looking to reflect a more current base date, and that's January 1, 2023 for this reval. That's the common point of valuation. And then the oversight, this is the work that happens over multiple years that SAMA helps with, and that is the City Assessor SAMA Committee I mentioned. We have a team of market analysts, so it's not just SAMA working independently, we actually gather the folks from the independent cities and look at how can we value property better, how can we make our models stronger. We do quality checks, so every quarter we do a reval report, we give it to our board of directors and it goes to the ministry just to say, how's the reval going, what risks are we seeing, and that's just to keep a health check, I guess, on the reval as it goes on. We have a provincial quality coordination program, so this isn't done just independently. There is a high-level review throughout the entire process, culminating in a final audit report. And then assessment trends, which we're going to show you later today to give you a glimpse of what's happening provincially. The assessment and taxation, again, just a reminder that assessments are value estimates only. They're only meant for distribution of property taxes. There's a lot of confusion where people will come in and say, I had a single property appraisal for bank purposes, mortgage purposes. Why doesn't it match the assessment? And that's because you have one appraiser with a few comparables taking some time to value that one property. We're mass appraisers, so we're using every sale in your municipality and we're combining neighborhoods and common properties to come up with our values. So that's important. And then the other important part is this is just the first step in the property tax system. There's percentages of value set by the provincial government. There's municipal tax policy, of course, so you've got local tax tools, you've got your mill rate determination, and in Saskatchewan, we have a lot of ability to modify the tax incidence through these tools. And then there's the education property tax mill rate as well. So in a reval year, a lot of property owners forget, they'll look at their tax notice when it comes out eventually, and they're going to be blaming the assessment side of it. But there really is two pieces to this equation. And a budget can be revenue neutral. So if a municipality keeps their revenue needs the same between 2 years, 24 to 25, technically you could have a revenue neutral tax incidence. And that's something most individuals don't realize. So they think my assessment went up by 30%, my taxes are going to go up by 30%. And that's a common misconception because the tax policy can mitigate that change and neutralize it, in fact. Lastly, this is one we like to point out. We have no authority in the area of taxation. So we're really on just that first piece of the equation, the assessment side. And I want to just quickly update you. This is an item we spoke of in the past, and it was a comprehensive review of the property tax system in our province. This was commissioned by SUMA's City Mayor's Caucus and undertaken by the International Property Tax Institute, or IPTI. And it's a international consulting organization. They're external, so they looked right across North America, and in fact they went overseas to say, what's happening in other jurisdictions that Saskatchewan might want to learn from and potentially look at changing. So this is a very positive review for our province, and especially for us in the policy area. It gives us a real good opportunity to look for some big improvements. They looked at British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario, and they went so far as New York, England, and Netherlands to look at their assessment systems. So a really good view of what's happening outside. So SAMA is responsible for the assessment policy side of it on behalf of the province, and that's what we've been looking at is educating, looking at feedback from the report as we await SUMA's final recommendations. There's some recommendations in this report that pertain to the tax system, and we have no authority over that. But SUMA's recommendations have gone to the ministry to be looked at, which is good. But SUMA set up they called it the Assessment and Legislation Policy Working Group. So a working group to go into 4 main options for change, and that work culminated late last year and resulted in a report going to government and to SAMA. We're looking at it currently. They were investigating ways to move forward, and through the process of looking at these 4 main options for change, which I'll show you quickly, they came up with a series of other miscellaneous recommendations. They're very positive, additional bonus, if you want, ways of improving the assessment system in Saskatchewan. So those recommendations came to SAMA and have gone to the ministry to be considered. They're mostly appeal-related legislative changes. And throughout the presentations, you've heard about the impact of appeals and some of how it's intensified. So those are very positive opportunities. So the 4 options for change that are being looked at are removing provincial percentages of value, and that's the purview of the provincial government. This is a big one. Shorten the revaluation cycle to 2 years from 4 years, where it is currently, and change the base date. Currently, we have 24 months between the base date, the effective date of valuation, and when we implement, and can we make that 18 or 12? So it really compresses the whole system. Everything we do in 4 years, we'd have to do it every 2 years. And you would get brand new assessments every 2 years. So that's something we're looking at currently within SAMA. And what we're doing is we're planning and budgeting, because we want to be able to say to you, our stakeholders, if we go to a 2-year cycle, this is what it will cost. In terms of resources, dollars and cents, computer systems, there's a lot of considerations here. So we're totally open to the possibility of shortening the cycle. But rather than get into the weeds and start planning it out and all the details, we want to know if stakeholders support the cost to begin with. And that would be all of our stakeholders. So that's a very positive review that we're doing, and we hope to have some results in the next little while. Later this year, we can begin sharing that and consulting on it. The last one was to move to true market value on regulated properties. So the regulated manual and properties I spoke of, one of the recommendations is to go to market. And the SUMA working group said, you know what, we've got a pretty good system. It's stable. Introducing sales for industrial properties is going to destabilize the system, and our goal is the opposite, to stabilize it. So I'm going to close off with a couple assessment system issues and risks, and we just discussed this one, and as I mentioned, we're budgeting a shorter cycle currently. I will mention that going back to our last review of a shorter cycle, a 2-year cycle would have been 15 to 20% more on SAMA's budget, or close to $3 million, between 20 and 30 staff. So as we talk about funding the current four-year system and the resource needs on a four-year cycle, there are going to be costs associated with a shorter cycle far above what we need to do currently. Revaluation education. This was actually in the IPTI report, and this is another really good recommendation saying that we need to do a better job of educating municipal officials and administrators on accurate communication of assessments and taxation. And that's not easy. And I know the people in this room, you're familiar with it and you do a good job, but there's new administrators and officials come on, and we need to do a better job of educating them. And SAMA wants to assist SUMA and SARM and other groups as best possible in that. The biggest risk, and Betty highlighted this today, and Myron as well, and we're hearing this from all the service providers, is we have a significant risk in the area of lack of trained staff. And we cannot find enough people to fill the holes. We see SAMA and the cities posting for positions. Nobody's biting to fill these holes. We heard from Chad Boyko from the SMB yesterday. They can't even find panel members to adjudicate appeals, and they're struggling. So that is a risk, especially as we consider a potential shorter cycle where we're going to need more staff. The other thing is computer systems, computer-assisted mass appraisal systems. These are the engines that drive the assessments. When you see your final assessment in a municipality, it's our computer system that lets us do this. And our computer systems in some cases are end of life. That's for the independent cities. They're telling us that they're not supported anymore. At SAMA, we're fortunate. We have Govern, which is a supported system, and we've got an IS department that helps us keep things on track. But even at that, we need upgrades to keep our technology current and to enable us to do more and to do more efficiently. And then finally, in terms of risks, assessment appeals, currently before the Court of Appeal, there's $4.8 billion in assessment at risk. So that means there's a lot of there's a lot of appeal work happening at all the levels, and it starts at the Board of Revision, it goes to the SMB, and it ends up at the Court of Appeal. Yesterday we learned from the SMB every single reval, so that's this year, and then going back they're seeing a 50 to 80% increase in their caseload. So in 2009, they had 466 appeals. In 2021, they had close to 2,500. So that's a five-fold increase, and the trend is continuing upwards. Court of Appeal. When I started, it was really exciting if we got a Court of Appeal case, and there'd be one, maybe in a reval cycle. The last two cycles, we're over 40 Court of Appeal cases. Some of these cases take up to, we've had one that just came out 7 years to get decided. So that's the backlog that's occurring, and we need these appeal decisions to inform how should we do our assessments. And if we've already started another reval and done the work, it's too late to introduce those changes. So that's a concern. That's something that we're working on, and part of the IPTI recommendations are looking at ways to make improvements there. And then appeal legislation. So all of the recommendations from the SUMA working group, from the City Assessor SAMA committee, has gone to the Ministry of Government Relations, and they're considering that because they have the municipal acts open. We're very grateful to our partners at the ministry for being open to listening to our recommendations and seeing what they can do with those to make some positive changes, and especially in the appeal area. Last of all, we are working on the next revaluation, which is hard to believe. You're implementing in 2025 and you're starting work for 2029, which seems a far ways out. But the base date will be Jan 1 of 2027. So that's only not even 2 years off, right? So we're beginning work in earnest on that and starting our consultations. And that is my presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And if not, all right, I'd like to introduce SAMA's Managing Director of Finance, Matthew Ratch, for his update.
morning, everyone. The financial statements that I'll be discussing a little bit are on pages 38 to 52 of the annual report. So looking at that, I had said to go through this line by line in great detail and go through it all, which I think we should. I'm going to need about an hour. And Betty said, Matthew, you can have 5 minutes. So we're only going to be able to hit the high points of the financials here today. Just to give you a bit of background on the audited statements, to go through some of the rules and regulations that we do follow. Our financial statements are prepared in accordance with Canadian accounting standards for not-for-profit organizations, is the classification we fall into. The audit is done by MNP. They were chosen by our board's audit committee through a competitive tendering process, and this was year 4 of their 5-year contract to do those duties. And I'm happy to report the result, which is that those statements were found to fairly and accurately present the financial operations of SAMA, which is always what you want to see in an audit. Speaking first about the revenues, SAMA's biggest source of revenue at over 50% is the provincial grant that we received. 2024, we received very good news that year. There was a $900,000 increase in our grant. It went from $11.388 million to $12.288, which relieved some pressure that had been building on us for years because we had received the same $11.388 million since 2019. So we were running deficits to make up for that and using reserves. And this sort of reset everything for last year. The next biggest funding source is, of course, the municipalities, which many of you see the municipal requisition once per year. That came in just under $10 million for 2024. And then the next biggest part is the Moose Jaw contract. That's the biggest portion of the $835,000 that falls into the contract revenue. And again, the City of Moose Jaw does not fall under the rules of the municipal requisition. They are independently, we put that contract together independently signed with them, whereas the rest of the municipalities that we serve, of course, falls under the AMA Act and the rules of the municipal requisition. And again, just bringing that back into perspective, we'd heard Kevin talk about the foundation. If you were to add up the revenues or expenses for last year, because it was essentially a break-even year, that approximately $24 million, the foundation of the $2.5 billion in annual property taxes that are paid, the foundation costs under 1% of that, which I think is a nice perspective to look at. That's a very cheap foundation. If you look at building a house, foundation costs you a lot more than 1%. Looking on the expenses side of things, as a provider of a professional service, as we'd expect, salaries and benefits are the biggest part of the pie there. You can see taking up approximately 3/4 of it. That being at $17.8 million for 2024. That includes all of our full-time positions. We also had a few term positions and, of course, our summer staff running last year. The next biggest one is the one that over several years is the one that has probably grown the most percentage-wise, and that in being the technology and computer costs. I myself, that's worked at SAMA for a long time, and a lot of you will remember how much more time-consuming it was to get data, or maybe how less accurate or valuable that data was, and the technology is really what speeds things up and makes things more accurate, which are vital in assessment. And it comes at a cost. Again, we use a lot of third-party contractors and have large expenses there, the technology costs being $1.8 million approximately for 2024. The third biggest category is the rent that we pay on our 9 locations, the 8 regional offices, as well as our central office in Regina. And then the largest part of the last part of the pie would then be travel, as we're spending approximately $750,000 on travel every year. As Betty had talked about, doing a site visit is very expensive. For any of us that are, you're paying per diems or looking at mileage rates, it's expensive to have people in the field, and that's just a necessary part of our business. Looking overall at the operating results, those revenues grew 5.2% from 22.67 to 23.86, and expenses only grew 2.8% from 23.07 to 23.72 million. So looking at that, you'd say, well, the revenue is growing a lot faster than expenses. Did that generate a surplus? And the short answer is no. That brought us back to a break-even point because we had been running deficits for several years and funding it with reserves. But thankfully, that revenue growth, which the largest part was the increase to the grant, closed that gap and allowed us to come back to a break-even level, which is really where SAM is designed to operate at, that the revenues expenses should be approximately equal. They must be equal over the long term. And just looking at Canada's average inflation rate, we're always looking at making sure that we're providing a good service, but that we're also cost effective, that we're providing good value. And that level was 2.4% in 2024. And adding that all up, we end up with a small deficit of $44,000 after we add in the capital spending to the operating fund. So then moving to this year, we did create a break-even budget last year for the year we're currently operating in, and had budgeted for a 3.5% increase to our major funding partners. Those of you that received the requisition would have seen on average that increase on your invoice this year, and we thank you all for that and the support of SARM and SUMA. And we did receive a provincial funding freeze, which is what will be causing us to go back into the area of running a deficit again for this year. On the expenses side, late breaking news that even came after this, we do have, it looks like a CBA in place that's going to give us some predictability on salaries and benefits all the way to the end of 2027. So that's good news for us. It makes planning easier when you know what your, the largest part of your expenses, what those increases are going to be from year to year. And then we do face the uncertainty not only in the level of appeals, but the complexity and to what level those go to. A few years ago, we saw our lawyer bills go from around $200,000 to $750,000. Again, that was almost all on large commercial and industrial appeals, and it was necessary that we procure the lawyers in the supportive value for those. Luckily, we saw that dip down a little bit last year, but we are still not certain where we'll end up for this year. As the rolls are open, we'll see what happens. And currently, and you'll hear about this in the plenaries as we move ahead, we're working on the 2026 budget as well as the 2026 to 2029 four-year plan. Also in our forecast, SAMA really only has two ways to deal with a revenue shortfall or if expenses suddenly spike or overrun our budget. And one is to cut costs, and the other one is, of course, the reserves that we hold. So if you were to see on the financial statements, you may see that we're holding, I think, $2.694 million in reserve, and that may seem like a large amount of money, but as the board is very aware, they've established a policy that's actually below really where we'd like to be, because that represents less than a month and a half of our operating expenses, or about 11% of the annual budget. So again, if things really spike in terms of legal costs, or if we have costs related to or reorganization or anything like that, something like $1 million can be spent very, very quickly. And such as last year, without the $900,000 increase from the province, we would have ran a deficit in that range, and our reserves would now be well under $2 million if everything else had been status quo. And with that, I think I've held it under my 5 minutes. And we are at the break time unless there are questions at this point. There are questions? Okay.
Okay, any questions for Betty, Kevin, Sean, or Matthew? Okay, there's a few questions on the Slido app. Where and to who does SAMA sell data to?
So in the Assessment Management Agency Act, SAMA has the right to sell information, and that's what we do. SAMA views an example. We sell our information to commercial users, typically, and it could be they're looking for individual assessment information, which they can get off of SAMA View through a commercial account, or it could be a custom information request, and that can come from companies, it can come from other government departments or other entities, and that's where we'll sit down and we've got a information bylaw, and according to the bylaw, we determine the cost for the information and the cost to prepare it, and then we can sell it. And currently it's Not a large sum of money, but it helps the bottom line, definitely, and it helps to fund SAMA. But what Betty had mentioned earlier is extremely important because SamaView is our main vehicle for selling information, and knowing that it's not secure and that other companies are taking from it is very worrisome. So we're doing our best to kind of control that, but it's in the interest of everyone, all of our stakeholders, that we continue to sell information, be protected in doing it, and that helps the bottom line.
If an appeal is in the courts for 7 years, how is the property, I'm assuming, taxed for those 7 years?
So in this case, it took the 7 years, and what happened was it had to do with a remittal in the year of the appeal. So where it settled is determining what the assessment should have been and then adjusting the taxes for that particular year. And the problem with that's the problem with delay in the appeal process. What happens in the intervening years when you've got an appeal? So if it goes to the Court of Appeal, quite often the SMB is holding those similar cases in abeyance, similar property, and it ends up just backing up the whole system. But you cannot change the assessment once the assessment roll is confirmed. You can only make a tax adjustment. So trying to get that shortened as much as possible is extremely beneficial to the whole assessment system.
Thank you, Sean. Any questions from the floor? I'll just remind that if anybody does have a question, you can write that question on the question cards, which are located on your table, and to which SAMA administration will follow up with a reply. And we have our CEO, Betty Rogers, and Darcy Bauer to lead the workshop session entitled 2026-2029 Business and Financial Plan. So I will pass it over to you, Betty.
Nah, we're good. Yep. Okay, well, thanks for those who came back on time, and the rest of you, I don't know, the teacher in me just wants to give you detention or something. What we'd like to do today, we've put some worksheets out on your table, and we would like you to have an opportunity to talk at your table and leave us some notes on the worksheet that we will pick up at the end of today to help us determine the important areas that we need to pay attention to on the technology side of things and on the people side of things. So as you know, we're in the process of developing our 4-year business and financial plan. We're responsible for assessment and governance. We've got revenue sources, and we have challenges. That's basically what you heard this morning. And we're a great organization. Did I mention that? But anyway. We have a mutually beneficial partnership. So we work together with the province, we work together with client municipalities to make sure that we provide the information that you need in order to run your local municipalities. We've already talked about the revenue generation on the taxable side of things and whatnot. So what we're wanting to do is make sure that we uphold all those things as we go forward for the 26 to 29 plan. And we want your thoughts on the technology side of things and the people side of things. So this is the worksheet that I'm referencing. Whoops, I'm getting some real feedback here. Am I too close to the mic? Thank you for fixing that. This is the worksheet I'm referencing. Take a minute to read the first page or so and then answer the questions. But before you do that, I'm going to turn it over to Darcy Boyer, who's our Managing Director of Information Services, IT, and he's going to just talk you through a bit of the technology stuff.
Thank you, Betty. Over the last little bit, SAMA has been going through a bit of a change in how we look at our planning, and we've been adopting what we call a capability-driven approach to planning. And if we talk about capabilities are business capabilities, and business capabilities are the things that we need to do to deliver products and service or to deliver value to our clients, you. They consist of four things. They consist of people, process, technology, and knowledge. And we've been talking, like, the whole theme today has really been looking at the people and the technology side. And from a capability perspective, although we have four, these are really the two that cost, that there's an investment or there's a, we could put a dollar figure around that. So they become important to us. With the focus on people and on people using technology, and going into planning, we have four underlying themes, and we have them here. So, it's to increase the quality and services to our client municipalities and province. How can we improve the things that we do with our people and with technology? We intend to maintain a manageable number of property reviews in the 4-year cycle. That's the essence of what we do. And we talked about, the revenue opportunities that we have in there and offset some of the costs some of the cost challenges that we're facing. And the last one is really ensuring that, we have the staff, that they're qualified and able to do the jobs that we need them to do. So as Betty mentioned, we're looking for feedback and really in two areas. When we look at the technology, what are the things that we do from a technical perspective that provide meaning to you, provide value to you? And are there some of these things that maybe we can extend, right? We've done a lot on the technology side to improve our capability, efficiency, and quality. Are there some of these things that, when you look at them, that, you could benefit from that as well as a user? People strategy, we have some challenges. When you look at the worksheet, we have a lot of retirements in front of us that are really going to challenge our staffing side. And, just looking for some ideas on how you think we might be able to address some of that. And, with that, we're going to take this information, and when we go into our planning session, we'll see what there is out there and see what other things we could be looking at. So the workshop directions, there's worksheets on your table. The first couple of pages are kind of the preamble. It's really a repeat of everything that's been said so far this morning, so it's probably a good place to start. And then you'll have until 12 to answer a couple of questions, and the questions in there are really focused on, what are some of the things that we could do or we should be looking at to improve our capability. SAMA staff will be around the room. We'll check in if you need any help, any assistance. If you have any questions, just ask us. And when you're done, leave the worksheets on the table. We'll collect them. And if you're remote attendees, you can submit your answers to sama.agm@sama.sk.ca. So this is supposed to be the fun part. It gets you into lunch. So I'll let you at it. And if you have any questions, we're around. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can everybody hear me? Perfect. Okay. Guess what? Guess what? It's lunchtime. Okay, but don't lunge at the buffet table. We have our Conexus staff who are going to direct you and your tables to the buffet. So we are going to reconvene here at 1 o'clock. And as I said, you will be directed to the buffet table. So enjoy lunch. Thank you. All right then. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. How was lunch? Good? Let's give a round of applause to the Conexus staff for lunch today. Thank you. All right, so we are moving into the afternoon agenda, and right up after I get off the stage here are the assessment jurisdiction updates. And then about 1:45 and 2:30, there are two plenary information sessions. The first is the 2025 reval, results and expectations. And then at 2:30, realizing efficiencies with GIS in assessment work. And then open for questions and answers around 3 o'clock. There are no resolutions, so you're all getting home early today. So first up, we will move into the assessment jurisdiction updates. So first on the list, I'd like to introduce Vanessa Vaughn, who is the assessment representative from Prince Albert. Vanessa.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is this the... There we go. So the City of Prince Albert, we have our own we do our own assessment. And so there's myself as the city assessor, and I am fully staffed. I have 5 assessment positions. 2 of those positions are licensed appraisers, and the other 3 are currently working towards their license, through our SAAA. And most of my staff that are working through their license have been people that I have internally gotten from other divisions within City Hall, so I got lucky there. Our assessment roll for 2025 is just shy of $4.6 billion. A large part of our assessment roll is residential properties, of just over 10,000, and our commercial assessments make up a good portion of our overall value as well, of about 758 properties. So we have just over 13,000 properties that we value within the City of Prince Albert. So we delivered our annual roll for the reval with all of our permit changes as well. And our roll opened on January 27th, 2025, and we closed our roll on March 28th. We do 2 supplementary rolls in a year, and they're projected for July 16th and October 9th. Because we actually do have some construction going on in our city. One of the major changes that we had for the 2025 reval is our commercial assessment valuations went from being valued on the cost approach to the income approach. We did a lot of follow-up work with property owners to do our modeling to get a higher percentage of the income and expense returns back. And we reviewed all of the models to make sure that we had the best stratifications as possible to ensure that all of the adjustments that we are making make good common sense for the public to understand. Oh, sorry, I need to go back. We also spent a higher amount of time reviewing our population. So we did a huge amount of population review prior to delivering our notices. We completed some additional educational content as well. We did some additional videos that are on our city website explaining the approaches to value, and we did some detailed model explanations that are found on our website that helped explain the model to make it easier for the public, the property owners, to understand. So in our reval, we had an overall increase of 20%. We saw our largest increases on the residential and the commercial. This does include exempt properties as well. So when it came to the tax tool side, I reported to our city council without the exempt properties so they could see how the shifting was. We do have a situation with our commercial that there are properties in our commercial classification that we did just value on the cost approach with a no MAF application. So we were seeing those values of those properties really going up in value. And this was addressed and explained to our council and our senior administration and the tax department when doing the tax tools, because there is a Court of Appeal case that we've had, and we've been challenged in Prince Albert twice on this matter, that the appellants were asking for this to happen on certain properties, and now for the 2025 reval, the outcome of that decision is hurting some other properties because we did not have sales of comparable properties to apply a market adjustment factor to those costed values. So Our commercial is kind of influenced on the increase side for those particular types of properties as well. So with our roll closing at the end of March, we have actually hit the highest number of appeals that we've had in the city of Prince Albert since I have been there in 2017, and I think ultimately for the history of Prince Albert. So we have 89 appeals that have been filed. We reviewed about 13 of those appeals so far. 73 of the appeals were sent back by a perfection letter from the Secretary of the Board of Revision for insufficient grounds. So she reviews them to make sure that they meet the legislative requirements, and so 73% of them went back. That's a very high percentage for us that we've never experienced as big before. 2 of the appeals have been denied by the Secretary. So it leaves us with 87 appeals to deal with in total in our department. And we did come to 13 agreements prior to the roll closing as well. So that 13 isn't included in the overall 89. So we have a lot of appeals to deal with, and most of those 87 appeals will likely go to a hearing. And majority of them are commercial properties. So I will turn really gray in the next 2.5 months. So 48 of those appeals are commercial, 7 are hotel appeals, 2 are commercial vacant land, 23 residential condos, 22 of those is 1 condo complex, 3 multi-unit residential, and 4 residential appeals. And we might only be able to avoid going to hearing on a few of those residential appeals. I cross my fingers with all the rest as well, but we'll try our best. So with all that work, with me only having 5 staff, we're not going to be getting much done for inspections until the summer months come. So we're going to be focusing mostly our inspections without doing a neighborhood reinspection or anything, is basically our sales, getting our sales reviewed. So we're getting caught up on our sales properties in preparation for the next reval, because right now we haven't even gone through and completely verified all of our sales even for 2023. So it's getting caught up on that work now. So we have approximately 517 residential sales to get done, the 25 commercial and 17. So after appeal work, that's what my staff will be busy doing, is getting those inspections done. We spend a lot of time in Prince Albert looking and on ways to develop and further see where we can make improvements and find efficiencies. So there's a lot of the discussions I have are inclusions with my staff. From work planning, I sit down with my staff and go over the work planning and can we get this done, can we not get it done, and get their feedback as well, because they're ultimately the ones that have to do the work for us, so in Prince Albert. And we have a lot of conversations about appeal work, about what went right, what went wrong, where can we improve, what do we need to do better, and all those sorts of things. So we have a lot of group discussions about all of the work that we do, which I'm finding with having a whole group discussion, a lot of my newer staff are learning a lot about the commercial area of assessment as well. When they're not even hands-on learning it and doing the inspections yet and stuff, they're still learning a lot of it. And their feedback and their understanding sometimes gives us a new perspective on things of how we can do and how approach things through an appeal and everything as well. We're always looking at better ways of communication. This is pretty much all the way from our council and city manager down, is always ensuring we're doing the best with communication. So we always look at ways of improving, making sure that we're always treating property owners fairly and equitably. We take the time to really explain, and our council, actually when our role is open, our council does a very good job as well, as saying, you know, call the assessment department. They will take the time to go through your assessment with you and explain it to you and everything. So we are finding we are getting more phone calls when our role is open because of that communication. Which is good, because it's a huge learning curve to understand our world of assessment, and the more people that can get it, understand it, It just helps improve the public trust as well. That in the work that we do does mean something, and is very thoroughly gone through, and what we all do. So we keep trying to provide more and more educational content on our website, on Facebook and everything. We try to keep non-public information secure and confidential, so a lot of the information that is provided for income expense information and sales verification forms, to try and get as much information back as we can, we always try to ensure with the property owners that it is kept confidential and stuff. So it all leads to greater employee engagement, and in the end, we want to make sure we have the best well-informed results that we can when we're developing our models and, in the end, the property assessments. So in the City of Prince Albert, we do have the expansion of the hospital that has started. You can see some big cranes in our city if you're going through. The yard development has started. Our new Lake Country Co-op Leisure Center is partially open. The hockey rink portions are open, and the pool will be opening here in a few months. So it'll be fully operational by the fall. It's a beautiful facility. We have a new McDonald's and a Starbucks that have opened in that area, and a Canadian brew house is to open soon. There's some new apartment complexes that have been developed and are open for rent. With the hospital expansion going on, we're finding a lot of the construction crew is now have a place to stay and everything, and we have some new senior complex living going up. So we have quite a bit of growth going on in the City of Prince Albert, the most that has happened since I've been there since 2017, so it's nice to see the growth. Our biggest challenge in our world is the assessment appeals. They are very challenging, complex, they take a lot of time and a lot of staff resources. They're becoming more complicated, and they require a lot of legal assistance to get this work done. And it's a lot of work to get done within the legislated timeframe that is outlined in the Cities Act. So this continues to keep increasing our costs and our time, and it allows for less time for staff to do physical property inspections to help find more value to add to the assessment role, which in the end would bring in more taxes. So that's our biggest challenge. So if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Now I'll introduce Michelle Blais, the assessment representative from the City of Regina.
How do I click the slide over? Oh, green button. Okay, there we go. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Blais, and I'm here to give the assessment update from the City of Regina. Normally, Kalinda's here to give the update. She's our city assessor, but she is in council this afternoon. What's new in Regina? Last fall, City Council approved the purchase of a new homeless shelter located just outside of the downtown on 1600 Halifax Street. This shelter will take the place of those temporary shelters at the Nest, which is the old YMCA building, and that is set to close in July of this year. Zoning. In March, a motion was passed by City Council directing administration to bring back a report at the end of April with proposals for allowing zoning of manufactured houses in all areas of the city. Currently, the city has 2 mobile home parks that allow for manufactured homes. This motion followed the recent decision of a property owner to terminate existing leases of manufactured housing on their land. The derelict properties motion. Earlier this year, City Council approved a motion for administration to bring back a report on derelict housing and parking lots, similar to the motion passed by the City of Edmonton. This motion would allow for properties to be taxed at a higher rate to incentive repair and revitalization of those properties. The report will be going to council at the end of Q4. Now, what's new in property assessment for us? Current staffing complement. We have a total of 19 staff in the assessment branch, with 2 currently on maternity leave, and have had approximately 40% turnover in staff since the 2021 revaluation. The roll for the 2025 assessment notices opened January 30th and closed April 1st, 2025. To date, there are 860 appeals filed. We expected this number to be higher than normal due to it being a revaluation year and some significant changes to some of the residential properties within the city. Assessment appeals, they continue to use a lot of resources. We are currently supporting the value on 7 years of property assessment appeals. (2025) Board of Revision. The number of appeals that have been filed with us for the 2025 displayed here are actually as of last Friday, and I just got the update today. Our final numbers are 860 appeals, 265 are residential appeals, and 595 are commercial appeals. Out of these numbers, we currently have 60 appeals with agreements to adjust. Just to give you an idea, back in 2021, we had a total of 600 appeals filed. So a little bit more than normal, but that's just because of the increase in residential appeals. Appeals at the Saskatchewan Municipal Board. 2024 appeals. Currently 157 properties to be heard at SMB. 95 are in a group appeal of industrial properties. For 2023, 3 commercial properties are before the SMB with a hearing scheduled in May of 2025. 2021 SMB appeals, land appeals on hold as they are waiting on a decision from 2020 in relation to base land rate, standard parcel size, and land size multiplier. The 2020 appeals went from the court back to the SMB and back up to the court where leave was granted to have another decision rendered by the court. These appeals will remain parked until that decision is rendered. Court of Appeal decisions. 2019 Southland Mall. Decision stated for the assessor to provide a remittal value of the property and consider lease dates. Remittal was done with no change of value to the property based on lease dates. Both parties appealed to the Court of Appeal, with leave being granted to the appeal, challenging that a property should be able to be valued on its own rents if it is not comparable to any other properties. This would be similar to the Midtown Mall decision from Saskatoon. 2019 Southland Mall has also submitted an application to the Court of King's Bench with issues with your remittal, with a court date to be set on that proceeding in September of this year. 2021 Court of Appeals, Canada Life, which consists of 44 office buildings, and Concord Group, which consists of 49 retail strip malls, have been heard at the Court of Appeal on October 30th and 31st, 2024. We are still awaiting those decisions. These are our reval numbers for 2025. Residential, which is our largest group, consists of 64,195 properties in 6 market areas. Changes range from a reduction of 20% to an increase of 30% in the neighborhoods. Overall impact and change to single-family residential is 7.25%. Residential condos, this group consists of 13,630 properties. The horizontal condo market, which is similar to a single-family home, are seeing an increase in value, while all other styles of condominiums, such as townhouse, low-rise, and high-rise, are seeing slight decreases overall. Multi-residential consists of 799 properties and includes the low-rise, high-rise, and townhouse rental market. Overall change is showing a decrease of 5.71%. Finally, the commercial and industrial are combined with an impact of 5% decrease in assessed value. Within this class, we have varying degrees of change. Our accommodations are seeing an average decrease of 15%. Our enclosed shopping centers are seeing a decrease of 35%, and our office market is seeing a decrease of approximately 5%. Oh, and then the overall city is seeing an increase of 1.7% due to revaluation. Here's a look at our 2025 priorities. Supportive value. As mentioned previously, we have around 860 appeals from this revaluation. The 2021 reval, we saw 600. The increase this reval in appeal numbers is from residential class, which is mostly due to some significant changes in some of the residential neighborhoods. Succession planning. Currently, 40% of our team has less than 4 years within the branch, making this their first revaluation. We are working to build from within to support our succession planning. Lastly, CAMA modernization. This has been ongoing for the last couple of years and has been slowed down due to resourcing and system issues. Currently, we are working in both the Oracle and .NET system while we continue to move to a .NET system fully. Are there any questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michelle. Now I will introduce Bryce True, the assessment representative from Saskatoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Bryce True. I'm the City Assessor for Saskatoon, and thank you for having me here today. Currently in Saskatoon, we are posting 2 managers, so one being our valuations manager and the other being our appeals manager, which given the timing, having an appeals manager in place a month before we start appeals for reval is not great, but we'll be working through that. In Saskatoon, we have 29 professional staff, 17 of which are licensed assessment appraisers through the Saskatchewan Assessment Appraisers Association, and 7 of whom who have an advanced designation with the IAAO or AIC, and an additional 6 who are pursuing their advanced designation. So we've been going through a turnover similar to what the City of Regina has, but we're working on building that back up and getting qualified staff in our office and getting that experience back. For 2024, our budget for the City of Saskatoon Assessment Department was $3.6 million. City of Saskatoon has continued to grow over the last couple of years. Our estimates, the population grew to 308,400 in 2024, representing an estimated increase of roughly 4.1 to 4.9%, or 13,000 people. This marks the 2nd straight year that the City of Saskatoon has experienced this type of growth. With that growth also comes more development and more parcels. So the City of Saskatoon has recently just grown to over 102,800 parcels, and for 2025, roughly $59 billion in total assessment. Commercial permits in the City of Saskatoon for 2025 saw a significant increase, up to 105 permits for new properties. The bulk of that being in our warehouse industry. I think we saw about an additional 23 new warehouses in 2024 than we did in 2023. And also looking at the chart here, 2016 was the last time that we had more than 100 new commercial permits in Saskatoon. So continuing to see that growth. Early indications for 2025 is we are seeing a little bit of a decrease and seeing that number go back to what we saw in 2023. For residential permits, saw another significant increase in 2024 from 2023. This trend we are still seeing in 2025, especially for single-family homes. We had a lot of apartments and new units start to be developed in 2022 and 2023. In 2024 and 2025, a lot of that focus has been on the single-family properties. So still seeing a significant increase in those continuing into 2025. As I mentioned, Saskatoon has officially passed the 100,000 roll number plateau. We passed that in 2022 and continue to grow. And we have close to 59.5 billion in assessment. 7,000 of these parcels are commercial and roughly 95,000 are residential. Our 2025 assessment roll was open on January 27th and closed on March 28th of this year. And with our assessment roll officially closing on March 28th, our board secretary is still feverishly working to get through all of our appeals notice, or our notices of appeals have been filed. We are estimating we'll be over 1,000 appeals for 2025, which is a significant increase to what we've seen. Given a revaluation year, we do expect that, but as you can see from this slide, every revaluation year has seen an increase in assessment appeals. Of those appeals, approximately 100 are residential and the remaining being commercial properties, and about 70% of those have come from one tax agent. Our 2025 reassessment saw an overall shifting of 13% for residential properties and citywide commercial increase of 4%. This 4% includes us sending out 1,800 amended notices to fix our warehouse models that recently went out on March 27th, and we'll have probably lead to more appeals because most of those properties are going up in value. The new median assessments for residential properties now went up to 399,000 for single-family homes and 216,500 for residential condo. Our next steps in the 2025 reassessment will be to defend the over 1,000 appeals that we have filed this year. Looking ahead to 2025, our main task in the office will again be defending our values while also trying to complete our roll maintenance to make sure we're addressing all the new permits, looking for new properties, and making sure we get those on the assessment roll for this year through our supplementary roll maintenance. End of April, we'll be issuing our amended notices. So for any properties that have changes dating back to January 1st of this year, any new builds, those assessment notices will be going out end of April, with our tax bills going out in May, due June 30th. We will be having our supplementary rolls in July of 2025, and then our final supplementary roll is in October of 2025. One of the big projects that we're working on outside of revaluation and our roll maintenance is a new initiative that our council has made a priority for Saskatoon, and that is developing an online tax portal. So we're looking to release phase 1 of this portal in early 2026. That will be a self-serving online portal where property owners can access their own assessment data and tax data on their own terms. So with that, that is not me. I don't have that nice of a mustache. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. I'll just make note that Julianne Rempel is the assessment representative from Swift Current, and she's unable to attend today. Thank you to all of the city representatives for presenting to us this afternoon. Does anybody have any questions? Don't see any? Okay, so we will move in then to our first plenary session, and I am introducing Andrew Workman for the 2025 reval results and expectations. It's your floor, Andrew.
That might be my favorite picture of all time, and I am reluctant to get rid of it, but I know the time is coming. So with that, I will move on to results and expectations of the 2025 revaluation, or more broadly speaking, the trends that we saw for this reval. So I'll start out with going over how assessment fits, what exactly is a trend, what are the trends we're talking about, the trends themselves, and a little bit of discussion past the base date. So there's kind of three things to know when we're talking about assessment in general. And that's property taxes are comprised of three main things: the assessment, the mill rates and tax tools, and percentages of value and other exemptions. And another way to think about that is it's kind of the starting point, and then those people who make decisions, the elected officials, do the mill rates, and then the rules and the legislation that we all have to follow. So those are the three kind of main driving points in the assessment system. And this is what it looks like in a calculation. We take that starting point, the assessment, and then we use those legislated frameworks and the mill rates, and ultimately we come out with property taxes payable. And I always say at this point that it's important to remember that after the equals sign is always a person. Whether it's a ratepayer in a home or whether it's somebody working for a company, there's a person at the end of this formula. It's not just numbers on a piece of paper. In terms of the assessment, when we're talking about changes, they don't necessarily equate to tax changes. So when we're doing a revaluation and we see those percentages and we see it moving around, we know that the assessment can change, but if the budget remains the same, then the mill rate should adjust. So in this example, if we need $2.5 million as a municipality and the taxable assessment is $250 million, the mill rate required would be 10. However, if our budget remains the same and we double the assessment, then correspondingly, the mill rate should drop in half. So we saw that kind of actually play out this year in terms of the education mill rate, right? We're seeing increases into the assessment, and it was relatively static on the education mill rate side of things. So what exactly is a trend, and what are we talking about? Well, there are some definitions that we can use to help us out. So from Webster, a prevailing tendency or inclination, general movement over time of a statistically detectable change, and a line of general direction or movement. And it's one of the things you're never supposed to do as a speaker is use a definition. And I actually hate it. I hate the definitions. But what I thought was instructive in this was that there was a theme running through them all. A prevailing tendency, general movement, detectable. What was missing from all of these definitions was it's an exact number. It applies universally to everything. What is missing from the definitions is as important as the definitions, because what we're talking about is a continuum when we're speaking about the trends. Even when you look at the fashion definition, they don't talk about everybody's wearing the same thing. And that's going to become important a little bit later on. So here's the calculation for the assessment trends. And we're reflecting a 4-year economic adjustment from 2019 to 23, implemented this year. This is why we're all here. The way we calculate that is we take the new assessment, we divide it by the old assessment, and that's going to give us our trend. Now, though, we're also including those physical changes on maintenance that were sent in by municipalities, the inspections, the re-inspections that have been done. Those are now included in the numbers. So I said fashion was going to become important, and I want to take you back to the heady days of 1983. And if you turned on your tube TV or switched on your wireless radio, I will almost guarantee you that you would have been inundated with red leather jackets. You would have, look around, everybody that's smiling probably had a red leather jacket at some point, if they're of a certain age. But you know what? I grew up in Regina, and I didn't see a whole lot of red leather jackets. I saw black leather jackets, maybe with some patches. And you know what? In my house, we were an acid wash denim family. That's what we had rocking back in the day. And so in the same way, when we're talking about provincial, local, and property trends, it's those coats that we're talking about. They can all be different colors, but we know what the actual trend is. The further you get away from the trend, the more varied it can actually be. So keep in mind, as I'm going through, I'm talking about red leather jackets. That's essentially what I'm referencing here. Your results may vary when you get back to your municipalities or your local property. And here's an example of what I'm talking about. You can see the percentage change varies on this residential map. And in fact, the municipality varies from the provincial trend. So this municipality is only going up 0.99, and we can see that there's movement around the 0.99 depending on where your property is located. And so what this is telling you is people are wearing different jackets, and that's to be expected. That's what we would hope to see. So as we move on, I think it's instructive here to stop for a minute and talk about those percentages of value. So those are one of those items that are fixed for us, right? We have the people, and we have the legislation and the rules, and ultimately the assessment as the starting point. And for us, in terms of stability, it's a good news story for us because the percentages of value this year have remained fixed. They're highlighted in blue where they've changed before, and you can see the two revaluations before us, there were changes. But again, no changes on this revaluation, so in terms of stability, that's a good news story for us. And now before I advance the slide, everybody prepare yourself for the first red leather jacket. Okay, here it is. The provincial totals for this year's revaluation are from 272 billion, which was the number we saw earlier today, to 315 billion on the full assessed value and a multiple of 1.16, or a 16% increase provincially. Looking at the taxable, we can see that it's 176 to 205, or just shy of 30 billion in assessment change. And again, the multiple remains the same. So let's get a little bit more specific. These are going to be some of the actual trends that we're talking about. And the next slides include SAMA information, the other cities, except for Swift Current, which wasn't available at the time we were preparing these. And again, those physical changes on maintenance. It's not just the revaluation trends that we're speaking about. So here are the 8 classes that are set out in legislation, and this is a provincial basis, 100% of value, so full value across the 8 properties. And I want to take a minute to focus on the agricultural side of things, and they're right in the middle, and they're going up at a multiple of 1.4 for both the ag arable and non-arable. And agricultural land in Saskatchewan, if you're not familiar, is a bit different because it's a regulated property. It comes out of the manual based on productivity, but on revaluations, we adjust it to the market. So we use sales to help calculate, and that's what you're seeing a reflection of here. That 1.40 number is a reflection of the market that occurred over the revaluation. Outside of the ag, it can also be instructive to break it out into 11 classes. If you noticed on the previous slide, commercial was at 1.05, but when oil and gas and mines are removed from the equation, commercial drops to 1.01, and now we can see the impact that oil and gas and mining has on the commercial sector. So when we're talking about commercial at 100% of value, yes, it's going up at 5%, but oil and gas and mining comprises the majority of that increase, is one of the takeaways that we can have. We can see that residential, seasonal, and multifamily are relatively stable. And if we look at pipeline and railway, that number combined in the previous slide was 1.35 for both of those. And we see that pipeline is up and railway is a little bit below the expected change. Moving ahead, here's the 8 classes again, but now we're talking about taxable value on a provincial basis.
So we see a little bit of movement in here. Seasonal and multifamily go up moderately, although not much. Arable and non-arable remain the same. And then we see commercial jump up a little bit, and pipeline and rail remain the same, as does elevator. When we expand that into the 11 again, we don't see any changes on the left side, but we note again a drop in commercial as oil and gas mining is pulled out. And we see the difference again in pipeline and railway. So when we're talking on the aggregate for the province, generally speaking, everything is up on a taxable basis for the revaluation. Okay, so moving off of the 8 class and the 11 class, this is SAMA residential, and it's really interesting and illustrative of what I've been talking about. See, these are 100% of assessed value trends for SAMA jurisdictions. If we look at city right through to village and hamlet, we see that it's actually relatively stable from an assessment perspective, 0.97 to 1.05. But if we look at the bedroom communities, strong, moderate, weak, or no influence, it starts to make you wonder if they're even wearing jackets anymore, like the numbers are more dispersed in there, right? But again, illustrative of what I'm talking about, that there's changes. The provincial might be 1.16, but we're gonna have variation in the individual properties and property types that we're looking at. The resorts, again, 9 to 22, not that much of a spread, and the RMs 1.01 to 1.1, relatively consistent through the RM types at SAMA. When we look at those, again, on the provincial total, it's 1.04 for SAMA jurisdictions at 100% of value in residential. So this next graph, it's actually comparing the revaluations. So the last revaluation took place in 2021. This one is now 2025. And what we can see generally is a trend up. I would note that there's been some recovery in residential and multifamily on the last revaluation. They were below 1, which would be a negative or a decrease to the assessment. Those have since recovered and we're up and moving along. And again, this is the 11 class graph, so you can see oil and gas and mining separately. So this next one, I find it really busy, and I generally don't like to include it. It's noisy, and it's hard to take away, because there's one thing that really clearly stands out in this graph, and of course it's the agricultural sector. 3 revals ago it more than doubled, and then it was 25%, and this year it's again 40%. The ag sector, in terms of assessment and on the trends, has been the strongest sector in the province for the last 12 years, and we don't see any sign of that slowing down. I do have some more information on that coming up. But yeah, that's 3 revaluations into the mix, and it's interesting to see at the very least. So Sean had mentioned a little bit earlier about mass appraisal, and I want to stop here for a second and talk about mass appraisal and what it means in terms of the trends. So we keep talking about this base date of January 1, 2023. And what that means is we are using the best information we have available at the time that we are doing the work to come up with an estimate of value for a fee simple property. If we change those assumptions, and if those assumptions are found to be wrong or something else happens, then by necessity the value would have to change. And so that's kind of what we see when we look after the base date. The information past January 1 of 2023 is going to change, and it's going to change the day after the base date. So these next slides show us the agricultural sector and the residential sector and what's happening past the base date. So these are not necessarily predictions, but they're indicators. We're not saying that this is what's going to happen on the next revaluation. We don't have all of that information yet. We need that 4 full years of data in order to make some conclusions as we go through. But what is the market telling us after the base date? Well, it's telling us that the arable agricultural land sales continue to be strong. They're still up. So if all things are equal and nothing else changes, on the next revaluation, we can anticipate another increase into the agricultural sector. The same is true on the pasture when we look at that past the base date. Now, there is seasonal variation, right? Those ups and downs, those peaks and valleys, those all move. However, overall, when we put a line on that, it's always going up. And so I suppose if you own agricultural land, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. If you're trying to buy it, you should have bought it 3 years ago, was my advice. So, and finally, this is residential. This is for SAMA jurisdictions. Don't be fooled by the scale. It's going up, you know, past the 1.1, not past the 1.5, 1.6 that we saw. It's a modest increase from where we snapped the line at the base date at that 1.04, 1.05, somewhere in there. And again, we're seeing variation, those peaks and valleys, but overall we would predict, based on the information we've seen to date, that residential would be actually going up. So with that, I started my presentation talking about a very specific coat, and I hope we've all come away that it's a coat of many colors, is where I will leave you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. What's that? I sure could in carpool karaoke by myself, but I don't think this is the format. Plus, nobody wants to hear that. Yeah, I believe the presentations are made available. Is that correct, Peter? They're on the website. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll make a request just in case anybody has another question they want to ask Andrew. We good? Okay. Next plenary session is the GIS Working Group. So I will invite Sherry Marshchuk, Evan Brandt, and Matthew Holmes to the stage.
Okay. Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending the SAMA AGM, and we are excited to be here to talk about the development of GIS at SAMA. Today we have a few people from our GIS working group, Evan Brandt, our GIS specialist, and Matthew Holmes, our GIS research officer. And so today we'll talk about what is GIS, what is the GIS working group all about, what are the projects and opportunities that we're currently working on, and Matt and Evan will do a little bit of a geoprocessing and looking at projects on the horizon. So these are the people that are working on behalf of the agency that are working to find solutions to the opportunities. The creation of this technical committee allows the coordination between divisions to address technical issues and the implementation process of the GIS applications for the agency. These individuals and individuals moving forward should have working knowledge of GIS and the work within their divisions. These individuals are the key to the successful implementation of GIS. The reason for the success thus far has been the dedication of staff at working on GIS full-time at SAMA. So SAMA has recently invested more into GIS with the hire of a full-time staff person, Matt, in technical standards, as well as Evan, our GIS specialist in IA, Information Services. SAMA also hires a GIS summer student every year for the past 5 years. We also have people like Jason Forward from Assessment Services that can contribute to what their needs are, and our newest member to the working group is Spencer from Industrial Division. Kim Hardy is also a colleague of mine in Technical Standards and Policy, and she provides insight and technical assistance on projects related to
the assessment integration with GIS analysis. Having people that are very passionate about GIS and the potential for the agency makes a huge difference. We are very fortunate to have an executive committee that we report to, and that comprises of Sean Cooney, Darcy Boyer, and Kevin Grote, and I toggle between the two committees. So I've heard that you've had a lot of chatter about GIS today, and we talk about the acronym, but I just thought I'd just reiterate what it actually is. So GIS Information System is a computer system that captures, stores, analyzes, and displays geographical reference information. So SamaView is an example of GIS at work. It lets us associate text-based property information with real-world location. And Evan's been working on a new version offering visual assistant topography, hill shading, assorted label updates, and performance improvements. And he'll talk about that in a few slides. So Google Maps is also a GIS, and it also shows features and locations on a map. The term that we're not too familiar with maybe is GIS analysis, and that's really where the power is in GIS. GIS analysis provides a unique capability by utilizing the characteristics of spatial data to identify and create new information. And essentially this is it's the series of in and out inputs. So the inputs would be road length, one-way streets, maybe two-lane highway, speed limit, turns, traffic. So all of that information gets put together, and the output would be, that gives you the travel routes, if you want to avoid all the freeways or if you want to have the quickest route there. So the other day Evan pointed out, I don't know, how many of you see The Office? A few? Yeah, so Michael Scott was using his GPS, and he was following it to a T, and he ran into the lake. So that just reminded me of a few times when I was out in the field. I take my paper map with me, and we've got the new techie staff that come, and they put everything into their GPS and take us down a bunny hole. So, you know, it's sometimes the user, not the technology there. What is the GIS working group? So this diagram provides a little insight into the governance model that we have at SAMA. The GIS working group was initially put together to allow people to solve problems across divisional units. GIS specialists has the technical expertise in software and its capabilities, and people like Jason from ASD, Kim and Matt from Technical Standards, and myself can pinpoint the data and correlate or analyze the data in a way to spatially see the outcomes. This model allows the highly specialized GIS staff to focus on hardware and software maintenance, data exchange and distribution, the application and data design and development, and having a GIS research officer and technical standards and policy allows centralized user training and support, extension and technology research into innovation and development. And it allows each division to devote time to the creation and maintenance of spatial data. So implementing a GIS vision was new for SAMA, and the working group developed a vision and goal as part of the governance model and the 4-year strategic plan. So the vision at SAMA for GIS is to empower our organization through innovative GIS technology to enhance assessment accuracy, efficiency, and decision-making processes while ensuring informed strategic initiatives and equitable resource allocation. So we have 6 goals. The first is to build and maintain reliable GIS data, making GIS data accessible to staff and through SamaView, and integrate GIS functionality with existing systems, train and educate and inform staff on GIS capabilities. Goal 5 is to implement an optimized GIS governance model. And our 6th goal is to expand and maintain enterprise infrastructure. And Evan will explain a little bit more in future slides on that one. Okay, so many of you may know the basic functionality and use of GIS in assessment with parcel management, with tasks like parcel identification, linking ISC with SAM's assessment IDs, managing addresses, and basic map production. SAMA also manages its field operations for residential and agricultural data collection with Govern Mobile, with the ability of the staff to know where they are on the property if there's multiple buildings on the site, or just to know where they are for location. And as I mentioned a few slides back, the valuation analysis is where GIS technology allows assessors to overlay various data layers onto geographic maps, providing spatial context for property assessment by making more informed decisions about property values. Some of the ways SAMA is doing this is with camera visualization, spatial analysis. We have used network analysts to determine the actual roads from the parcel to the grain elevators, and this determines the miles to market for our arable agricultural model, whereas before we used the centroid of the parcel and as the crow flies. So this new method is more accurate. And we'll see shortly Matt with the work that he's doing with analytics and remote sensing for creating a flooding layer with sentinel imagery data. And Evan is working with the industrial division to integrate GIS analysis through portal apps for reinspection and maintenance. So as mentioned in the previous goals and vision slide, SAMA has a focus on providing enhanced spatial products to their clients. So what constitutes a successful GIS? Is it the robust database of GIS layers, or the implementation of software and hardware that enables the users to use GIS? Ultimately, it's the success of the Enterprise GIS program is how the GIS is being successfully used to impact the organization and SAMA's clients. These are just a few of the opportunities and projects that we have been successful in implementing. We thought it would be neat to show how the process was being done historically, how it's done currently, and what the potential is for the future. So this one is kind of near and dear to my heart. For the agricultural lands, prior to the 1980s, paper was used, and all of the small quarters images were transferred to an opaque mylar 4 inches to the mile. And believe it or not, the conversion of this paper soil maps has been in the works for over 30 years. It began with scanning the large mylar paper that in some cases has yellowed, and shrink that down to the 8.5 by 11 paper. Then georeference each township for each RM and meshing every township into a provincial layer. So last year we were able to accomplish developing a provincial historical copy of the hand-drawn work that was completed in the past. So we're pretty happy about that. We now are on the home stretch for creating a digitized layer for waste rating areas and soil polygons. So SAMA is over halfway complete on this, and once this project is complete, it will mean less rework in the future, as well as once these layers are complete, will allow us to do more GIS analysis on the layers. So I'll now pass it on to Evan to talk about our GIS infrastructure.
Hope nobody's playing a drinking game for every time we say GIS, because it's about to get a lot worse. All right, so essentially one of the areas that we've been expanding our GIS is our GIS Enterprise. And we got a diagram right here that kind of shows how Enterprise is a content delivery system that gets GIS information to everybody who needs it. This is internal users, this is external users, and we're kind of just on the cusp of what that content is. You can see we have Maddox, which is an internal map application, and SamaView, which is obviously our public face. Insights is another application that we've been having a lot of fun experimenting with. So what is content? Content is any piece of GIS data that is essentially shared amongst users in our organization or external users. We essentially picture a future where appraisal experts and GIS experts are working collaboratively to create content that helps us perform our work more effectively, and perhaps even design solutions that help you guys understand the work that we're doing. So Enterprise JS allows us to connect users to our greater data processing infrastructure. And that means enhanced connectivity with SAMA's databases, automated GIS workflows, improved spatial data collection speed, collaborative data editing, custom portal applications. And custom portal applications they're quite exciting. These kind of manifest as a regular web map that you might see when you visit a web page, or some sort of dashboard like we have in that image up on the screen. And some web experiences that can kind of do a bit more heavy lifting than some of those other examples. These can be as simple as something that lets you inspect an individual property to learn a bit about the data, or it can be something as complicated that embeds directly with our CAMA and allows appraisers to collect spatial data right then and there. We actually saw a lot of these applications when we were going through COVID. Oh no, he said COVID. Everybody probably remembers the Johns Hopkins dashboard. We're actually using that exact same technology to do all of this. A couple years ago, we made a pretty big change. The search times on SAMA View used to be a little bit slow. I don't know if anybody remembers when they used to take 18 seconds, but I do. Now we made a 99.8% improvement. It's down to 0.04 seconds now. Actually, with that new upgrade, it's actually at 0.02, but who's counting? This is another area where we made a pretty big stride. We have a process called the SAMA View Scheduler that essentially pushes new information up to SAMA View when an update is requested. We used to only be able to do about 20 jurisdictions in a night. It was a difficult process. So we reworked the GIS side of it, and we ended up getting it to about 80. I think it could actually do 100, but Kevin Grote and I argue about it sometimes. Another big improvement was our trend maps. This used to be a process where people would essentially say, hey, I need a map that shows me what Andrew was talking about in his last slide. And what would happen is somebody would essentially receive the work order. They'd go and create that map on the left and hand it off to the person. It would take a couple hours or a day, depending on the complexity. But the information is pretty important, so we wanted to speed that up. So what we ended up doing was we kind of distilled the formula of the process and automated it. And now we're basically creating these maps on the right. We're doing about 1,700 of them every 3 days. The process only takes 2 hours, but it's a good example of us really thinking how some of these processes work and distilling them down to their most efficient format and getting information to the people who need it. We also improved our printing on SAMA View. I don't know if anybody tried to press the print button while the imagery layer was on in the last couple of years, but it wouldn't work. It would spin a little bit and then tell you got an error. We just recently fixed that, so that's an exciting one. We also took the time to dig into it and make a bit more of a more professional looking map, something that lets that has the SAMA branding on it, lets the user see the key map, and I even left a little bit of room for a legend in the future if I need it. There we go. Yeah, so this is, we also have some plans for new ways we're going to be using GIS. We're only scratching the surface with the stuff that we've done so far. There's a lot more in store. We came up with a 4-year strategic plan, and we're really thinking about this in a way that we want GIS to play a larger role in the way that SAM is providing the services. We also recently put together a plan for our upgrade that's going to be happening in around 2025 or 2026. We're moving to Enterprise 11.3. It's going to have some really cool functionality that we're adding on. There's some improvements on the dashboard stuff that I had mentioned earlier. Not too long ago, we provided the industrial appraisers with our first map application, and this is it's something that can allow appraisers to interrogate the data in ways that they wouldn't exactly, they can't do in regular Matics. It gives them access to an attribute table, lets them use GPS positioning to put their own location on top of the data that they're viewing. We even have some clever stuff that'll do some elevation analysis, but we plan to bring some of these types of functionality to the rest of our appraiser base in the next period of time. Sherry had mentioned the industrial, the stuff that's going on with industrial. We just kind of stumbled upon some areas where GIS would be very good at performing some of the work that is difficult for appraisers to industrial appraisers to do in the field. We have a process where they're essentially establishing how much railway will exist in one jurisdiction versus another. And that can actually be a difficult process when you really try to understand it, but it's something that GIS was, well, essentially built for. It's very good at dividing up lines into clever little pockets and summing the total area of them and basically providing clean-cut reports that can basically be provided to an appraiser in an automated fashion, and they can continue on with the work that they need to do. The most impressive stuff is what Matt's going to show you here with remote sensing. This is, I always call this in the office a game changer in the field of assessment.
All right, thanks, Evan. So let me show you some of the stuff that I've been working on. SAMA's use of GIS so far has primarily been for visualizing data, and we're increasingly using it to improve our data quality. But what about using it for creating data? Imagine being able to monitor crops, track land use, or even detect soil salinity without ever leaving the office, all while monitoring an area that's 100 times bigger than what people can do manually. That's possible with the power of remote sensing. At its core, remote sensing is the science of acquiring information about the Earth's surface without physically being there. We use sensors on satellites, drones, or airplanes to collect data, and then we use that data to determine information about the ground and any features that exist on it. That includes landforms, buildings, rails, everything. In our project, we're using the various colors of light, or the various wavelengths of light, and by detecting differences in the light reflection between water, plants, and the ground, we're able to determine some pretty useful things with impressive degrees of accuracy. So let's quickly walk through the process of remote sensing. So we wanted to see if we could determine flooding rates within an RM for reinspection. We started by finding a source of remote sensing data, which in our case was the Sentinel-2 satellite out of Europe. This satellite takes a picture of the entire Earth every 5 days, and it's free to use, so it's perfect for us. The satellite essentially takes a picture of several points along the electromagnetic spectrum, ranging from red, blue, and green to several ranges of infrared and ultraviolet. And so this is an image here showing what just one of those bands look like. This is an image of the green light that it picks up. And so the brighter the light is, the whiter the light is there, the brighter the green light is, and the darker it is, the less green light there is there. This image is from mid-July, and we chose mid-July because if the land is covered in water at that point, it's unlikely to be seeded that year, and then we would give that area a flooding deduction. So we can get mid-July images from every year going back 10 to 12 years, and then for each year, we use math on the individual colors, and doing it in an order that causes water to be highlighted and darkens most of everything else. And so you'll see here all of those white areas are standing water and all the dark areas are crops and houses and most everything else. So if we do this process now for every year that we have, and then we stack those images, we can count at each individual location if water was present and how many years it was present for, to make a new image that shows where the water is and when it was there. And it's a bit of an incomprehensible mess at this point, but we can fix that. So we can convert those counts into the flooding ratings that we use at SAMA. And so after adding some color to it, we end up with essentially a heat map like this, where the darker the color is, the more frequent water was there, and the extent of the color is where the water actually was. And this then can be combined with our assessment information to give us usable data at the property level. And so we can see here on 2 separate properties what this would look like. Remote sensing provides 2 major benefits here. First, there's no guesswork. This is built on real data with a repeatable process, so we can trace this back to see how a decision was made when we're supporting value. And second, it's fast. This process here took me less than an afternoon to do for the entire RM, where normally for a single appraiser it would take them several weeks to do this work. We're currently in a pilot project right now with this, and this data is going to be used as a decision support tool for appraisers to give them extra information to fill gaps from the imagery that we currently provide to them. They're also going to be validating this data to see if we need to change the model or anything into how this data was created, and we can adjust that and move forward with that. And if it ends up being successful, we're planning to roll this out to all appraisers and then look to expand into other agriculturally relevant areas such as salinity, erosion, or tree cover. Given the number of areas that remote sensing has been used in so far, in the future, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that we could reassess most or all of the agricultural land province-wide every single year, with appraisers just being there to make decisions and make calls that the computer can't make. I'm not making any promises about that, but I do think the future for remote sensing at SAMA is pretty bright. Thanks. Any questions? Yep.
With respect to the appeals process and the remote sensing, has there been any tests yet through the various levels of appeal on this? It'll be interesting to see where that one goes.
No, this is new for this year, and it's not going to be used to make any actual decisions. It's just going to be supporting information for appraisers, so I don't think the appeals process will change at all for now. That will be something that'll have to be explored later on, though, to see how that would work. We need to really validate this information before we give it free rein to start actually doing assessments, and so that's going to be a ways away. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Exciting stuff, hey? I could see Betty's just like, yes. All right. So next on the agenda is your board. So I'm going to invite the board members up here to see if any of you have any questions for any of us. So if the board members want to come up to the stage, please. I don't know if you want to sit or just stand up here, right? Yeah, right? Yeah. We could Oh my. You stay here with me. Right? I was going to say you guys probably could have all just stood behind me. You're so far away, but so if anybody has any questions, please go to the microphone, state your name and municipality or for the record, and there also might be some questions on the Slido. So Okay, first question, has there been an assessment done on how much the technology would cost to protect the data from data mining? Darcy.
It's nice to have him behind me. It's complicated. You know, a bit of background here. Back last October, we saw some questionable activity taking place on our systems, and when we did a little bit of analysis, we found that there was a user located in Iran scraping data. So we spent a little bit of time with that. We did some work, and we took some steps to lock down well, not really lock down the system, but make it more difficult to get access to our system. And I think some of you might have probably impacted by that. If you wanted to set up a new account, you had to call in. So we had turned off the ability to set up an account automatically, and that was just a security measure that we had to take. And we also spent a little bit of time on the cybersecurity front and added some front-end security measures that would prevent people from outside of North America from getting into the system. So that lasted for quite a while, and a few weeks ago we started to see the situation happen again. So we went back and we turned off the ability to automatically set up an account, which again is probably going to impact some of you. If you want to set up a new account, you're going to have to call in. Like on the public side, we're telling people if you want to find out more information about your assessment, go onto the system, but now you have to call in to do that. So it's really problematic. So yeah, Betty mentioned earlier that, you know, we had a proposal come forward to talk about the cost of that, and she declined it. And you know, there's good reason for that. The proposal that we had in front of us was really intended to address the account setup side of this, right? And what we had found that is you know, the activity was coming from approved accounts. Those people that had actually paid for an account and had the ability to do this scraping of information. So that was only part of the solution. The bigger part is a lot more complicated because it really goes into the core of our system. What this activity is doing is actually setting up a script and just hitting the system over and over again in a way that accessing information that's accessible to all of you. The problem is that with automation, it really happens quick, and you know, we just can't accommodate that. So the solution for us is to work to prevent that. And right now we're working. This is a product, a service that we get from an external partner. So we're working with them to come up with the actual cost to be able to prevent this from reoccurring. So right now, what we're doing on the account setup side is kind of managing the problem, but it's not really fixing the problem. The fix the problem is going to be quite a bit more expensive. We're not really sure what the cost is, and you know, I think we're doing some work, and over the next several weeks, we hope to have a better idea of what that cost might be. And you know, the good news is if there is good news around this, we've always thought there was value to our data. Somebody trying to steal it just kind of reaffirms that there is a value, right? So there's the good news.
Thank you, Darcy. Will the assessment return be able to be completed digitally on MySAMA for 2025?
The answer is yes. We implemented last Friday, and we've been going through it this last couple days, and everything seems to be working so far. And we've already got our first return in through MySAMA, so we're good to go. As your roll closes, you'll get a notice email that your return is available to be filled in on MySAMA, and we're excited to roll that out for this year. We're also sending out paper returns for municipalities to choose which direction they're going to go for this year, and then over the next few years we'll move to going with MySAMA for all confirmation.
Thank you, Carlo. All right, given that the income approach for valuations represents approximately 62.9% of SAMA's appeal cost to defend, has any consideration been given to transition away with it? And then there's a follow-up question from the same person. In dollars, what amount does 62.9% of the appeal cost budget represent? Sean?
In terms of the amount spent on the income approach, that is not atypical. If you look across Canada where you have the three approaches to value, it's the income approach, complex properties that rent, that typically generate the most appeals, and that would be true for all the provinces. So in terms of the cost that's typical, in regards to moving away from the income approach, that would be a fundamental change away from the market value-based system which is used right across North America. So to restrict that approach would take Saskatchewan back in time and off the standards that are used right across our industry. The reason for the income approach is for properties that rent, where you have adequate information to administer that approach, it provides the most accurate value. Unfortunately, it's also highly complex and it is prone to appeal, and the tax agents that we spoke of, those with that knowledge are able to look at the valuations closer. We need the expertise to work on that as well, and that's where the solicitors come into play, and we have a lot of legal costs tied to the income approach. But for now, moving off the three approaches to value has not been discussed. I see a second question here. In terms of dollars, what amount does the 62.9% represent? It depends on the year. Matthew, the finance managing director, had mentioned, I think at certain times that total cost has approached to $500,000 or more. It depends on the year, so whatever that cost is in a given year, that would be in the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Does that sound accurate?
You should know better.
Certainly, as Sean had said, 62.9% of our appeal costs just on the external legal alone in, say, 2022, which is a high watermark for legal expenses. You're looking at about $500,000 in external legal costs. And then when you take approximately 2/3 of our internal resources that our staff spends on those appeals, again, the majority being commercial, I would estimate we are probably in the area of $1 million a year in a year like that spent on commercial appeals. And again, commercial is the bulk of the appeals time and costs.
Thank you, Matthew and Sean. Any other questions? I do not see any. All right, I am now going to call on Myron to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Don. As you can see in the last few minutes here, as a board, we don't know very much. But that's why we hire all these experts that can answer every question you have, so it works out in the end. I'd like to thank the GIS team that was up here and gave the presentation. And I know it's way above my intelligence level, but you know, I hope it gives you a bit of an idea of the potential going forward, the GIS, the things that it could do for us. And like they mentioned, we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. And that's why, as a board and as the executive, we're looking at that and saying, you know, the potential that's there, we have to start getting to the point where we have a team that works on that at a full-time way of doing it. And not that they're working on other jobs and they just kind of do this on their spare time. So we have to get to that point if we want to get the most potential out of that project. So that's just gives you an idea of where we're going in the future, that, and hopefully gives you an idea of why we feel that it's a good process to going forward. I'd just like to thank everyone again for being here, both the people that are online and the people in the room today for coming and spending your day with us. certainly it helps all the discussions we've had and the work being done at your table earlier. I saw a lot of you writing a lot of notes in that, and that really helps us. That gives us some ideas, and sometimes brand new ideas pop up. But also, you know, it backs up some of the ideas that we have, or sometimes you're saying, no, we don't think you're going in the right direction. So we very much appreciate those different opinions as you've written them down. I'd just like to remind you that there's if you didn't get a chance to ask a question today, there is a question slip of paper on your tables. Please feel free to fill them out, and we'll get back to you later with an answer for those on those papers. And then this year also, we're going to be sending out an email out to you. Those of you that attended the meeting, we'll be sending an email out, and if you could respond to that email on just what you thought about the meeting and where you think if we should be making changes in the future, and that gives us a good idea of what direction we should be taking future AGMs. I'd just like to take a minute to thank the SUMA, SARM, and the province for their continued support in the funding for SAMA all the time. They're our major stakeholders. I'd also like to thank everyone that serves on our advisory committees. I know there's some of you in the room here today, and thank you very much for your time that you commit to that, because that means a lot to us too, on letting us know what we're doing right and wrong. And also thank you to the city jurisdictions for doing your presentations today. We always appreciate that. I might have mentioned that before, but we work very closely with the city assessors. We meet with them several times a year in the city assessor SAMA committee meetings, and that puts a lot of the information together, and we solve a lot of mutual problems that we have. We get to solve them by working with the city assessors. So very much appreciated for you guys being here today. Other than that, again, thank you all for coming, and have a safe trip home, and hopefully we'll see you all in Saskatoon next year. Thank you.